History books are full of famous male outlaws, but they left out the deadliest ones. We're diving deep into the untold stories of the women who ran with notorious gangs, planned daring heists, and weren't afraid of a showdown. The first woman on our list wasn't just an outlaw. She was practically royalty. 1. Belle Starr, the Bandit Queen. She was often called the Bandit Queen. Belle didn't just stumble into the outlaw life. She was born into it. She grew up with some of the most infamous figures of the West, like the James and Younger brothers. She was smart, a talented piano player, and an excellent shot with a revolver. Belle wasn't the type to sit on the sidelines. She helped plan robberies and was an expert at moving and hiding stolen goods, especially horses. She had a flair for fashion and would often ride her horse side saddle while wearing a black velvet dress and a feathered hat with 2 pistols strapped to her hips. She loved the attention and the reputation that came with her lifestyle. Her life, however, came to a mysterious end when she was ambushed and met her demise near her home. The case was never solved. Belle Starr was famous for her style and her connections to powerful outlaw gangs. But the next woman on our list used her sharp mind and even sharper tongue to build a different kind of empire in the dusty towns of the West. 2. Lottie Deno, the Poker Queen. Her real name was a mystery. Some say it was Carlotta Thurmond, but everyone in Texas knew her as Lottie Deno. Lottie wasn't a bandit who robbed stagecoaches. Her weapon of choice was a deck of cards. She was an incredibly skilled poker player who traveled from one boomtown to another, winning huge amounts of money from men who underestimated her. They'd look at her and see a well-dressed, beautiful woman. They didn't realize she could read them like a book. Lottie was known as the Poker Queen of the West. She had a calm and cool personality at the poker table, which made her even more intimidating. She was so good that she once won what would be hundreds of thousands of dollars today in a single game. She was also romantically linked to another famous gambler, Doc Holliday. As it turns out, she eventually left the gambling life behind, settled down, and became a respected member of her community, leaving her dangerous past behind her for good. Lottie Deno proved that you didn't need a firearm to be one of the most successful outlaws. But our next woman wasn't afraid to use one, and she became famous for a crime that was almost unheard of for a woman at the time. 3. Pearl Hart, the Lady Bandit. Pearl Hart holds a special place in history. She committed one of the last successful stagecoach robberies in the entire country. After her husband left her to fight in a war, Pearl needed to make a living. She tried working regular jobs but found them boring and low-paying. That's when she met a man named Joe Boot, and the two of them decided to rob a stagecoach. Here's the kicker. After they got the money, they got lost in the wilderness and were captured pretty quickly. During her trial, Pearl became a media sensation. She gave interviews from her jail cell, talking about how she was forced into a life of crime because she was a woman with no opportunities. She famously said, "I shall not consent to be tried under a law in which my kind had no voice in making." Many people felt sorry for her. She was eventually sent to prison but was pardoned after a few years, living the rest of her life in relative quiet. Pearl Hart used her fame to tell her story. But the next woman was part of a much more secretive and dangerous group, the infamous Wild Bunch Gang. 4. Laura Bullion, the Thorny Rose. Laura Bullion was known as the Thorny Rose, a fitting name for a woman who was both beautiful and dangerous. She was a key member of Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch, one of the most successful train-robbing gangs in American history. Laura wasn't just a girlfriend along for the ride. She was an active participant in their criminal activities. Her main job was to help fence stolen goods and handle the money from their robberies. This was a critical role that required trust and intelligence. She was also known to disguise herself as a boy to help the gang scout out locations for their heists. She was deeply in love with a fellow gang member, Ben Kilpatrick, also known as the Tall Texan. The two were eventually caught after a massive train robbery. Laura served some time in prison and, after she was released, she left the outlaw life behind completely, living out her days under a different name. Laura Bullion was a core member of a tight-knit gang. The next woman, however, was a force of nature all on her own, a true wild card of the Wild West. 5. Calamity Jane, the frontier legend. There's no one else in history quite like Martha Jane Canary, better known to the world as Calamity Jane. She was a frontier woman, a scout, and a storyteller. Her life is a tangled mess of facts and tall tales, many of which she made up herself. She was known for her habit of dressing in men's clothing, which was very unusual at the time. She was also known for being an expert shot and a fearless rider. Calamity Jane was a heavy drinker, and her wild behavior often got her into trouble. She drifted from town to town, taking on odd jobs and making friends with famous figures like Wild Bill Hickok. While she wasn't an outlaw in the traditional sense of robbing banks, she lived completely outside the law and societal norms. She was a rough-and-tumble character who survived in a dangerous world on her own terms. Her legend grew so large it was hard to tell where the truth ended and the stories began. Calamity Jane was a master of creating her own legend. The next woman on our list, however, tried to keep a low profile but couldn't escape the danger that came with loving one of the West's most famous gunslingers. 6. Big Nose Kate, the fearless companion. Her name was Mary Catherine Herone Cummings, but history remembers her as Big Nose Kate. She earned her nickname because of her prominent nose, but she was known for much more than that. She was the longtime companion of the legendary gunslinger Doc Holliday. To live with a man like Doc, you had to be tough, smart, and fearless. And Kate was all of those things. Kate wasn't a passive partner. She was once credited with breaking Doc Holliday out of jail. The story goes that she set a fire as a diversion and then entered the jail with 2 pistols, convincing the guards to release him. She was also with Doc in Tombstone during the events leading up to the famous showdown at the O.K. Corral. She and Doc had a stormy, passionate relationship full of loud arguments and grand adventures. She was a strong-willed woman who stood by her man through some of the most dangerous moments of the Old West. Big Nose Kate's story is tied to one of the most famous showdowns in history. But our next woman was part of a family that was in a constant state of war with their powerful neighbors. 7. Ann Bassett, the Cattle Queen. In the remote Browns Park area of Colorado and Utah, Ann Bassett was royalty. She was known as Queen Anne. Ann and her sister Josie grew up on a massive cattle ranch and learned to ride, rope, and shoot just as well as any man. Their family was constantly fighting with powerful cattle barons who wanted to take over their land. Ann refused to back down. She was accused of cattle rustling, or stealing cattle, many times. Truth be told, she probably did it. But it was often in retaliation against the big cattle companies that were trying to push her family out. Ann was clever and knew how to use the law to her advantage. She was taken to court for her alleged crimes, but was so popular with the local people that she was never found guilty. She was a beautiful, intelligent, and fierce defender of her family's legacy. Queen Anne fought for her family's land and legacy. The next woman on our list was a much more mysterious figure, a phantom who appeared at night to strike fear into the hearts of her enemies. 8. Della Rose, the Phantom of the Plains. Not much is known for certain about the woman they called Della Rose, or sometimes the Cat. She was a member of the Doolin-Dalton Gang, a notorious group of outlaws who terrorized Oklahoma and Arkansas. Della was known for her incredible horse riding skills and her cat-like stealth, which is how she got her nickname. She was an expert at moving quietly and striking without warning. Her main role was as a scout and a lookout for the gang. She would gather information about train schedules and bank layouts, helping the gang plan their robberies. She was also known to carry messages between gang members, a dangerous job that required her to ride long distances through hostile territory. Her story is shrouded in mystery, and she seemed to disappear from the historical record after the gang was broken up, leaving behind only the legend of the Phantom Rider. Della Rose was a shadow, a vital but unseen part of a dangerous gang. Our next woman, however, was anything but unseen. She was a flamboyant character who lived her life like a performance on a stage. 9. Kitty Leroy, the showgirl sharpshooter. Kitty Leroy was a true jack-of-all-trades in the Old West. She was a dancer, a saloon owner, a gambler, and a sharpshooter. She was also known for having a fiery temper and a string of husbands, some of whom did not last very long. She was a performer at heart and knew how to draw a crowd, but she was also someone you did not want to cross. Kitty was famous for her many marriages. The story goes that she married 5 different men in just a few years. Her relationships were often as dramatic as her stage performances. One story says she challenged one of her husbands to a showdown in the street after an argument. She was not just a pretty face. She was a skilled businessperson who ran her own successful saloons. And she was an excellent shot who was not afraid to defend herself. Her life was a whirlwind of excitement and drama, but it came to a tragic end when her last husband brought her life to a close before taking his own. Kitty Leroy's life was full of drama and danger. The next woman was also a gambler, but she was known for her quiet dignity and her incredible luck, which followed her for decades. 10. Poker Alice Ivers, the high-stakes player. Alice Ivers Tubbs, better known as Poker Alice, was one of the most famous female gamblers of the Old West. She was born in England, but came to America as a young woman. After her first husband passed away, she found herself needing to make a living and discovered she had a natural talent for playing cards. She soon became a professional poker player, a very rare career for a woman at the time. Poker Alice was a striking figure. She was always well-dressed, known for her fancy cigars, and was said to be a brilliant card counter. She traveled all over the West, from dusty mining camps to fancy saloons, winning fortunes at the poker table. She was not a cheater. She was just incredibly good at the game. She claimed to have won over $250,000 in her lifetime, which would be millions today. She was also known to carry a pistol and wasn't afraid to use it to protect her winnings. Poker Alice was a master of cards and calculation. The next woman on our list, however, was a master of a much different and darker art, the art of deception. 11. Eleanor Dumont, Madame Mustache. They called her Madame Moustache. Eleanor Dumont was a Frenchwoman who came to America during the gold rush. She was a professional gambler who opened up her own high-class gambling parlor. What made her stand out, besides her skill with cards, was a distinctive line of dark hair on her upper lip, hence the nickname. At first, it was subtle, but it became more prominent as she got older. Eleanor was an expert at a card game called 21. Men would come from all over just to play at her table. She was charming and elegant, and her parlor was a place of luxury. But she was also a shrewd business operator. After years of success, she fell in love with a man who turned out to be a con artist. He swindled her out of her entire fortune and disappeared. Heartbroken and broke, Eleanor spent the rest of her life drifting from town to town, trying to win back her fortune, a shadow of her former self. Madame Mustache's story is one of rise and fall. Our next outlaw was also involved with a legendary figure, but her name has become one of the biggest mysteries in the history of the West. 12. Etta Place, the Great Unknown. Who was Etta Place? That is one of the great unsolved questions of the Old West. What we do know is that she was the companion of Harry Longabaugh, better known as the Sundance Kid, and she was a key member of Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch gang. She was beautiful, intelligent, and spoke several languages. She appears in the most famous photograph of the Wild Bunch, looking calm and confident among the most wanted men in America. Etta was not just a pretty face in the gang. She traveled with Butch and Sundance all the way to South America when the law was closing in on them in the United States. She was an active participant in their outlaw life, helping them run their ranch, which they used as a cover for their robberies. But then, she simply vanished. One day she was there, and the next she was gone. No one knows what happened to her. Did she return to the U.S.? Did she pass away? Her disappearance is the final mysterious chapter in the story of the Wild Bunch. Etta Place is a mystery wrapped in an enigma. The next woman's story, however, is all too real, a brutal tale of how a woman could be branded an outlaw simply for being successful. 13. Ellen Watson, the Cattle Queen Controversy. The story of Ellen Watson, often called Cattle Kate, is a sad and controversial one. She was a homesteader in Wyoming who owned her own small ranch. She was a hard-working and independent woman who was building a life for herself on the frontier. But she lived next to a powerful cattle baron named Albert Bothwell, who wanted her land. Bothwell and other powerful cattlemen accused Ellen of being a rustler. They claimed the only way a woman could get so many cattle so quickly was by stealing them. They gave her the nasty nickname Cattle Kate and spread rumors that she was trading favors for stolen livestock. The truth is, she likely bought her cattle legally, but the rumors were enough. A group of her powerful neighbors decided to take the law into their own hands. They captured Ellen and her husband and brought a violent end to their lives, a dark event that showed how dangerous it was to defy the powerful cattle barons. Ellen Watson's story is a tragic example of frontier injustice. The next woman also dealt with livestock, but in a much more unusual and slithery way. 14. Rattlesnake Kate, the Serpent Survivor. This story is a little different, but it's so incredible it has to be told. Her name was Catherine McHale, but she earned the nickname Rattlesnake Kate for one unbelievable event. She wasn't a bank robber or a card shark. She was a tough-as-nails farmer. One day, while on her horse with her young son, she found herself in the middle of a massive migration of rattlesnakes. Hundreds and hundreds of them. Her horse was surrounded, and she knew they were in terrible danger. She grabbed a nearby fence post and began to fight back, protecting her son. For hours, she fought off the swarm of venomous snakes. When it was all over, she had brought an end to 140 rattlesnakes. The story became a legend. She later made a dress out of the snake skins, which is now on display in a museum. She was a true survivor, a woman who faced down incredible danger and won. Rattlesnake Kate was a legendary survivor. Our next woman was also a survivor, a young girl who got mixed up with one of the most notorious gangs of the era. 15. Rose Dunn, the Rose of the Cimarron. Rose Dunn was just a teenager when she fell in love with a handsome outlaw named George Bitter Creek Newcomb, a member of the Doolin Dalton gang. Because of her love for him, she became an associate of the gang. She was known as the Rose of the Cimarron. Her main role was to supply the gang with ammunition and information while they were in hiding. The most famous story about Rose is one of incredible bravery. During a fierce shootout with lawmen in Ingalls, Oklahoma, her boyfriend George was badly wounded. While bullets were flying everywhere, Rose allegedly ran out into the street, helped him get onto his horse, and the two of them escaped. It's a tale of remarkable courage and loyalty. However, her story takes a turn. Some people believe that she eventually betrayed the gang, leading lawmen to their hideout. Whether she was a loyal lover or a clever traitor, her story is one of the most compelling of the Old West. Rose Dunn's loyalty was questioned, but there was no question about the next woman's commitment to the outlaw life, a life she shared with her equally dangerous sister. 16. Josie Bassett, the Ranching Rustler. Josie Bassett was the sister of Ann Bassett, the so-called Queen Anne. Like her sister, Josie grew up tough on their family's ranch in Browns Park. She was an expert horse rider and rancher, but she also had a wild side. Josie was married 5 times and was known to have relationships with several members of Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch gang, who often used the Bassett Ranch as a hideout. Josie lived a very long life, well into the 1960s, and she became a local legend. She was accused of many crimes over the years, including cattle rustling and even making illegal homemade spirits during Prohibition. She was a true holdout from the Old West, a woman who lived by her own rules until the very end. She was tough, independent, and full of secrets about the famous outlaws she knew. She never backed down from a fight and defended her land and her lifestyle with everything she had. Josie Bassett was a lifelong rebel who knew some of the most famous outlaws. But the next woman didn't just know outlaws. She might have taught one of the most famous ones everything he knew. 17. Sarah Jane Newman, the possible mentor. This story is a bit of a historical puzzle. Sarah Jane Newman was a rancher in New Mexico during the time of Billy the Kid. Some historians believe she was much more than that. They think she might have been an outlaw herself, running a network of cattle rustlers, and that she may have been a mentor to the young Billy the Kid. The theory goes that Billy worked on her ranch when he was just a teenager. It's possible that Sarah Jane, a tough and independent woman running her own operation, taught him how to ride, shoot, and navigate the dangerous world of the New Mexico frontier. She was known as a shrewd businessperson who wasn't afraid to bend the rules to get ahead. While there's no solid proof that she was a criminal mastermind, her connection to Billy the Kid makes her a fascinating and mysterious figure in the lore of the Old West. Sarah Jane Newman's story is one of mystery and influence. The next woman's story is just as mysterious, as she spent most of her life pretending to be someone she wasn't. 18. Flora Quick, the male impersonator. Flora Quick had a secret. For much of her life as an outlaw, people knew her as Tom King. That's right, she dressed and lived as a man to be a successful horse thief and cattle rustler. In the 1800s, it was much easier for a man to move around unnoticed in the criminal underworld, so Flora created a new identity for herself. As Tom King, she was known as a skilled horseman and a cunning thief. She worked with various gangs and was notoriously difficult to catch. Her disguise was so convincing that for years, no one suspected she was a woman. Her true identity was only discovered after she was finally apprehended by the law. Her story is a remarkable example of the lengths some women had to go to survive and make their own way in the rough-and-tumble world of the West. Flora Quick used a clever disguise to hide her identity. But our next woman was all about making a name for herself, becoming so famous that a president heard her story. 19. Mary Fields, Stagecoach Mary. Mary Fields, or Stagecoach Mary, was a true powerhouse and a pioneer. Born into slavery, she gained her freedom after the Civil War and eventually made her way to Montana. At over 6 feet tall and with a tough personality, she was an imposing figure. She took on a job that was almost exclusively for men. She became a star route carrier for the United States Post Office. This meant she was responsible for delivering mail through some of the roughest and most dangerous territory in the country. She drove a stagecoach and protected it from bandits, harsh weather, and even wolves. She was known to carry a pistol and a shotgun, and had a reputation for being one of the most reliable mail carriers ever. She was so respected in her town that she was given special permission to drink in the saloons alongside the men. She wasn't a criminal, but she was an outlaw, in the sense that she broke every single rule about what a woman was supposed to be and do.